Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is the Budget Process AMA. Today is the 25th of February. This is our early AM US East Coast time, midday for our European friends, but good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are and wherever you're coming in from. It's good to see everyone. Thank you for joining us today. The goal today is answering any questions you may have on the budget process or on the particular budgets. So, whatever questions you may have, happy to give them. Give them some attention or answers if possible. Apparently, some very prominent voices in the community have strongly disagreed with the model that we have that we've presented. It's a draft model anyway, so it's always been possible to make changes and modifications. Feedback is great. You know, uh, Delivery could always be discussed as to what's a better form of delivery or another, but feedback is appreciated, and we are reevaluating what if any procurement model fits in Intersect at this point. Is what it is. I don't see as we have much choice in that matter, so we're gonna.
Yeah, because I was wondering, right? It was like you have to revisit some stuff and reevaluate. And actually, a little bit skeptic now to say, okay, that was critic already all the time, right? And I think you did a pretty good job to try to listen to as many people as possible and incorporate it, right? But as it is addressed now, I think it's actually destructive. So a little bit worried, how much does this push you actually restarting the whole thing from scratch and then trying to figure out, no, actually it's more about damage control than actually, yeah.
The short term, yes, but I mean, ultimately, what we have to do is we have to gather, we have to talk about it, we have to come up with a solution, right? Like I said, the most important thing here is that this was always a draft process. One of the things that we did here is we tackled the idea that we went from the idea of a unifying budget process where all the different ideas were out there, came together, and we made decisions with the DREPs as a group, right? Here's our project. This. If you read the original design of the plan, it was, hey, here's our project. We're the champion of the project, and we're gonna pick someone to hold us accountable, whatever that is, and then the Treasury funds will flow based on that accountability. So that part's still here, but what tried to happen now is that we have multiple budgets and we have administrators, and these are things that came out of the Constitution. These aren't things that we designed out of whole cloth. This is literally the language that the delegates settled on. So that was the shift for Intersect, was looking at multiple budgets and administrators. And so we shifted the role to try to fulfill what the Constitution said. And if the way we read it and the way we designed it didn't work, well, that's okay. We can go redesign it. We literally are here for the members. That is what we're here for. We're trying to do what we think is best with the membership. And we're trying to live in the world of the Constitution as it stands today. So that is ultimately how we got here. Yes, we pushed something that is unpopular. And I'm going to, I will admit that. I was like, yes, hello, hi, I'm Lloyd. I pushed an idea that is unpopular with the community. I did. I took the feedback in. So did everybody else on our team. We've all said, okay, we have a problem. We have to fix it. So we didn't respond by further shoving it down people's throats or starting an ad campaign to try to tell you all the joys of an RFP process. There aren't any. A procurement process is a procurement process. This is what we designed is incredibly standard. It's not a power grab. Sorry, Charles, it's not a power grab. It was simply a natural design for the environment that we're in. But it's unpopular. So we're going to go back to the drawing board. We're going to listen to the community, and we're going to come up with a better solution. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to answer it that way, Felix. I appreciate you. Hey, Marlon, how are you this morning?
No, I'm doing pretty solid. No, I appreciate that. And I see like you guys have been getting some really tough blows. It's like it would be nice if some of the criticism was more constructive versus, you know, attacking or the way it is, more like, okay, how can we make this better? We see what it is, right? And how can we move forward in that respect? That's the only thing I would hope for. And, going forward, um, maybe some kind of training to, for the broader audience to understand. I'm going to push for that wholeheartedly. I'll even make one up as far as what a procurement process is, the whole budget function, what that entails, reserves, why we need it, and what happens. Because I don't know if you saw my whole long thing I put in there. Let me know if I missed any points there, if I'm inaccurate. Because overall, when I looked at the overall budget, right, I noticed certain things. It was just like, okay, we're gonna do this, and it's all under one umbrella, one amount. But then it's like, okay, where's the line item for this specific item? I'm not trying to get into like, but at a minimum. And then like, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna accomplish with that? Where is that? Like even catalysts when you go for funding, that's just basic. And then when you look at some of these things, um, when you go down a little bit further, even within the categories, you have categories, right? And it's like, what is going on here? So, and that's why, I went in, I was like, man, this is way too much. Like from looking at that, I can, I assumed, or I came to the conclusion that it seems like there wasn't a lot of intercommunication or like a Kaizen or powwow with across the communities.
I can speak to that a little bit, Marlon, just as a little bit of
Yeah.
history. I mean, there was, again, the original design prior to having multiple budgets was that we were gonna that everybody was gonna kind of bring their own thing to the table, and then there'd be a prioritization process. That was sort of the original. It was almost a kumbaya kind of. And as I,
Oh, yeah.
however, it was based a bit on the way DARPA runs things. The way DARPA runs things is very similar. They bring forward a whole bunch of ideas and shop them effectively to get a buy-in for oversight and to get a buy-in for funding. And it is pretty typical as a good model of public procurement. So that was where we were starting from, and
Yes.
that would have allowed us to do that. But the pivot ended up with what we really have to do is the committees are going to have to fully develop some kind of plan. And they had, things like TSC had been already working on doing the prioritization. They already had a whole really good laundry list. They had full-time equivalents. They had all kinds of really useful things. That's why TSC's budget is so much further ahead than all the others, right? Because they were already kind of doing the shopping and who was going to, who could do what piece. And we also have a limited number of vendors who are even capable of that part. That's actually where I see a lot of the way forward in this, is that it's not like there's hundreds of thousands of vendors out there that can do the
Oh,
stuff
yeah.
that
Yeah.
IO
100%.
and Twig and Well-Typed and these guys, they're capable of these very maddeningly specific things that there probably aren't a dozen companies in the world that could even bid on those things. So it's fine if we take those and put them in a process that's a transparent process that we can all agree on, that the DREPs can buy into. Fine. But then there's this whole other thing, and this is where I think we're at, and this is, I'm hoping, I mean, you're kind of previewing conversations that are yet to happen, but there's this whole other part of this process where could be a much more traditional, because if you need media services, or you need education, or you need if you need a janitor, there's lots of companies that can do that, right? So a traditional procurement process is just like bang on for something like that. It's super easy.
Okay, and there we go. And that was my point. I'm not degrading or taking away the value from the current process, right? It's just like, okay, we have media services, in the same thing as, say, like YouTube videos, then we have like LinkedIn, then we have, and then it's just all clumped in. So we have categories within category, so we have the overarching one that says this is for all these items, which, you know, could appear separate with different type of deliverables, right? But then it's just all under one umbrella. Okay, so I'm like, okay, I'm looking at this. It's like, okay,
Well,
so
let
we
me add
have
another
go
wrinkle
on.
here, Marlon. Let me, because you're right, exactly right. There's these, and so here's the next wrinkle, and this was actually something Jane was talking about on X recently. She was actually asking very pointed questions about what it means to do an info action, right? So it means that you take 100,000 ADA and you ask a question with it, a yes or no question. There's no means of doing any kind of nuance other than a yes no question, and you immediately lock up that 100,000 ADA for 6 epochs, 30 days, and there's no takesy backsies, right? You're going to get the answer. If you can't refine it, you can't get any nuance out of it. You just get an answer. Unfortunately, by design right now, we have to do a lot of pre-work to get to an info action. So this is part of the problem as well. Like, I would love to have a flexible action that we define, you define the threshold. And I saw some faces here too that, oh, he left, darn it.
Mhm.
I saw Neil's here. I was going to be like, hey, he left, but Duncan's still here. So I'll tell to Duncan. Duncan can tell Neil's later.
Yeah, and two, forgive me, because there's some places I'm ignorant because the information and all the committees, they're spread out, right?
Oh yeah.
So if I'm incorrect or misstating anything, I would appreciate it if anyone corrects me or put me on the right track.
No worries, Marlon. And that's why I was just adding a little nuance to what you're saying, because you're right that, because it was kind of, and it gets to that idea of putting out lots of info actions. But what we really need to do, if we're going to do that, we need to refine the info action, right? It needs to be a more flexible tool than it is right now. Right now, it's highly inflexible. Actually, you can put a yes or no statement in it. You can
Mhm.
put up 100,000 ADA, and you can wait 6 epochs, and then you have to very carefully measure the results that came from it, because it's not very clear how to measure those results. It just simply gives you a record of the votes that took place, and that's it.
And this would be my suggestion, like on the write up is all I'm talking about, right?
Mhm.
You know, you have the marketing working group budget, then you have all these items clumped together under there for the one lump sum funding. Yes, you can still have that funding, but break it out into the subcategories within that, and then say, okay, for this item, we expect to draw in, we're going to do X number of events. We're going to go to coin census or whatever, China. We're going to do that. Those type of things. Like within there, looking at it, like at the lineup, because these are actually all separate milestones within and promises, right? And then if it's approved the way it is, it's like, well, what do you have to compare to? What do we have to hold the committee to that's supposed to execute on this? Like we have like nothing. We can't say, well, you said you were going to do four, but nothing. You only did one video. Is that enough? But you have 400,000 ADA. And then, when you have about 10 different items clumped up together, it makes it a little bit confusing also to read. I'd recommend, break it out, into the right subcategories and show the amount that you want to spend for your YouTube. You're buying t-shirts for X events, mugs, coffee mugs, branding and things like that.
Right. And this is where we're getting past the budget allocation and into the procurement process, which is this
Mm-hmm.
is really the meat of the discussion that's having to happen now that we're having to reposition. So thank you so far, Marlon. Do you mind, if you don't mind, Marlon, I'm going to give Tex and then Felix a moment here, and then we'll come back and chat some more. Is that cool?
100.
Thanks, man. Tex, go ahead.
Yeah. I was just gonna check in here. Heard a couple of things in there, and there's no trouble whatsoever. But I did hear marketing working group, which is kind of like a little age old at this point. Yes, there is still one, but that's now underneath the growth and marketing committee. And I just wanted to make myself available if there were specific questions on the budget that you've seen. And as far as any back end or why does it look the way that it does, I believe they do have a proposed changes that they're trying to release pretty quickly here. And I know we're a ways into the process, but the point is they are trying to get something out. The various items that you see, even if you see them as high level, right? I believe the terminology they may even be referring to now is work streams. It's designed that way so that it is more easily understood by the community and by the D-reps. So there's not any lack of transparency. There's not any goal of hiding anything. There's still a lot of things to do, yes. But it's a big guess a little bit right now for some of these things because especially for 2025, there's going to be 6 or 7 months. How much are they actually going to spend in that period? How much are we actually going to get back on that? And then if they just put out a proposal and all they're going to do is events, then why is it not the events committee? And it's not therefore the growth and marketing committee. So I'm just putting that out there. I don't know that there was like direct questions there, but I heard a couple of different things. I've worked very closely with that group. And again, I do know that they are working on a solid revision. But if there are more specific questions, I will do my best to answer that as well. And then I think this goes back to maybe Felix in the beginning there. Again, if you have not seen it, I'll just mention it on the call. OSC last week agreed to pick up 2 items from the TSC budget, or rather pick up one item and add another, which is the accelerated program. I do see again Chris here and Duncan's here, and that's going to be through our commercialization working group. And then the big item there is going to be the tooling working group. And that is bringing over, actually, Duncan, correct me if I'm wrong here, but that's taking 4 million out of TSC and reducing that to 2 million on the OSC budget, if I'm not mistaken. So just a little bit of movement of funds, all still within the core bucket, but that is a change that we released, I'm pretty sure last week. So.
Yeah, I don't know if you want me to expand on that text, but you've pretty much got that right. That we had a line item in the TSC budget that was for non-core roadmap items. So those were things that didn't necessarily fall into what the product committee's roadmap was. We wanted the opportunity for good projects that needed funding, for there to be a route for those. What we've done as we've been sifting through the project proposals, we've realized that a lot of them are related more to tooling, and that can be either creation of new tools, which I think is more around Project Catalyst area, and that's where we've directed them to. But we've recognized that there are a number of really good tools within the ecosystem that actually there should be a route for them to be able to apply for maintenance funding. They're providing great utility to the ecosystem, but that is at an ongoing cost. So we want provision in there to be able to compensate for that. And we felt that was better sat within the open source committee rather than the technical steering, which is more focused on development.
Awesome. Thank you both for that added context. Appreciate it. And it kind of shows, to Marlon's point and to Felix's earlier also, that there is work that's still ongoing of just getting the committees to each understand one another, where each one begins and ends, and whose responsibilities are what. And so I think that's that really is our next step, is focusing in on what are we going to take responsibility for as Intersect and what we aren't, because some of it has to go back to the Cardano community or the DREFs or wherever it needs to go. If we're not the appropriate place for that, then who is? Let's find those answers out and move this forward. So go ahead, Felix.
Also, I think the situation actually also invites, I think, maybe tackle the key issues, which is for me, not, to be honest, not that much about the exact budget allocations and all the stuff, but more like understand Cardano governance. Like, I love this metaphor. Cardano governance was like Lord of the Rings, right? You have a bunch of rings, some you give to the elves, some to the humans, some to the dwarves, and then comes Intersect and comes Sauron, and now one ring to rule them all. right? So all the key orderings and all this stuff, but now you get this one to rule them all a little bit, right? I like to adjust the story a little bit because I think this is very much how the larger community right now receives Intersect, right? I think right now anything what comes from Intersect is in the wider community highly opinionated. Whatever comes out of Intersect right now is bullshit because it comes from Intersect, right? A little bit. Where we see Intersect so far didn't have the possibility to build the legitimacy nor the trust within the wider ecosystem to do what it actually wants to do, right? I think that's actually pretty fair as well in this regard, because when you look on the budget, like I think it's too ambitious and maybe too arrogant to go already on this massive budgets, because Intersect is still very young. What can we learn from Catalyst? Some really good things. I still remember the first Catalyst rounds, 250K for a full funding round. Now 500K for a full funding round. Like step by step building up, and before addressing, or let's say managing the larger task, first build the capacity, the legitimacy, and the trust. Like in Cardano, the first 3 years, nobody gave a shit about Catalyst. Like there were almost nobody. And it took more than 2 years to actually get the Cardano ecosystem fully engaged in the thing, right? I think in this regard, I think Intersect actually can learn a lot in this regard to say, understand more the broader community perspective, that they are afraid that there's one entity which now does a little bit of everything, right? Everything what we wanted to take off from founding entities and Genesis keys and whatnot, already the committees, right? Yeah, committees are elected by paying members at Intersect. And we saw in the committee elections, like, was it sometimes not even like 60 or 100 votes sort of around, like, where do we want to say, hey, these committees have a legitimacy already? And everybody coming from the community and questioning this, that's rightfully so. That, well, great, there were 50, 60 people who paid membership at your organization to vote on a committee who will now manage shitload of billions of ADAs to manage the coin. But I think we have to get a little bit more to reality sometimes and calm down and say, hey, the ambitions are there, the needs are there, this time pressure is definitely there, but don't move too fast, too quick. And we are pretty good on Cardano on this actually, right? To say, hey, we go step by step. Now in 2025, we still execute a roadmap which was introduced 2017, right? I think Intersect could maybe move more in a facilitator's role as it initially was thought of than the key decision makers, where the community very quickly gets the impression, oh, they decide on so much now, literally everything, right? And I think they're right with this. I myself are concerned on Intersect with that.
It's fantastic feedback, Felix, and I appreciate it. I think you've encapsulated a lot of what we've been hearing over the last few days, and you targeted a couple of things there that I think that I really want to point out. It's like there was responsibility shoved into Intersect, right? That's the reality is that many of these decisions and many of these things are based upon the fact that things were said, this is your responsibility now. You have to take this on. Here's all of the core, here's all of the core software of Intersect, of Cardano. Here's all the, like there is a tremendous amount of work that has to be done to support that. And I mean, it's not for everyone. It doesn't require marketing and it doesn't require, all of those other things. But I think Intersect also became a place where, and rightfully so, I think we were told, go to Intersect if you want to shape the future of Cardano. I think that's what we were told. And so, so that initial promise of we want to come to Intersect to shape Cardano meant that a lot of people with a lot of big ideas came to Intersect and have tried to set up things within Intersect. And so it has grown in a mission organically. Now that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right mission. You know what I'm saying? They were making the right choices based upon the environment that they were in, but it doesn't mean it's the right decision for Cardano. And I think that's what we're trying to get at now is what is the right direction for Intersect? What should it actually do? And then what is the avenue for people who are there providing all this energy, providing all this excitement, providing all of this guidance, but it doesn't fit in the Intersect's model? Like what do we do to as a community, not as Intersect. This is Lloyd as a Cardano community member right now, not as an Intersect person. What do we do to support those people who have these ideas and want to put them forward and need to build structures around them, right? We how do we as a community support them? Right. And so these are big, like philosophical questions. Let's, sit down and have drinks and talk about and figure out. But that's how Intersect got here. Intersect didn't get here through, what was a disgusting power grab? No, Intersect got here through lots of responsibility from lots of different areas of the ecosystem coming in and saying, how do we use Intersect to do this thing, whatever this thing is? And I was there in those I was one of the very first people that signed up at Edinburgh whenever we had the opportunity to sign up. So I've been at this the whole time and I've watched that process. And I've only very recently been, paid to do work at Intersect, and the work that I'm paid to do was specific to the budget. And I've dutifully done exactly what I was asked to do, even if it's unpopular, clearly, right? But that's the truth. The truth is that we got here by a lot of different, very well-meaning interest and energy from the community gathering in Intersect because it was the only place for all that energy to go. So if we can find a way to send that energy out into other entities or other developments, which, by the way, I have a set of plans for. I'd love to start sharing them with people. Maybe we can, figure that out. And that was actually kind of one of the things I saw Intersect as is, like you said, more of a facilitator, less of a doer. Like, how do we spin these things off rather than let Intersect incubate, maybe help them get going, but never to stay within. Like these are thought of as independent entities that all do their own thing. That's I don't know. I think that's just an off the cuff right now from, that's kind of fits with some of the things that I've been thinking on and trying to design as we've moved through this, because that's always the case with, how do we move to the next part of this? What's the next steps we can take to improve this, and to further decentralize and further diffuse the power into a wider network?
Just last quick note for this before Marlon, on this, whatever you guys do on Intersect over there, my only wish and highest recommendation is really learn from Catalyst in this regard, build the legitimacy step by step. Because in Cardano, after all, if you ask something, community will judge you on the legitimacy, do they have a track record? Did stuff like this already? If we could imagine Catalyst going with our own proposal at the Treasury and say, hey, we propose Catalyst funding for 3 funding rounds 2025, high likelihood most people would actually vote for this. Why? Because they have built the legitimacy in the ecosystem by proving this stuff. Intersect is not there yet. So go more step by step, slowly. Don't shoot too high too early, and then at the end we sit in the front of ruins, a bunch of lost time and resources, and you have to figure stuff right.
Yeah, fair enough. And thank you for that again, Felix. And that's actually why Catalyst said they came through Intersect, is they wanted to help build the legitimacy of Intersect. They believe in the mission, and they came to Intersect to use Intersect as their administrator / approver. That was their choice. They could have gone independently, but they did come in because they wanted to help Intersect build its legitimacy. So again, you're right. We have to step back. We have to take our time and measure a few more times now, and hopefully the next time we cut it won't be as painful. So that's the goal here. So thank you again for the advice. Thank you for for your perspective, because it is super important to hear that's part of the way forward is slowly but steadily building up the legitimacy of what the organization can be for Cardano. Marlon, go ahead, bud.
Oh yeah. No, I appreciate the effort, because I know from experience this is not easy. And I like what you said about incubate. And part of my vision is hey, can Intersect be self-sustainable, right? And you saw what I sent, but that's a separate story. Going into what Felix was saying, one of the things I asked about in a chat or somewhere was like, hey, we have all these items, where is like the project plan of how you're going to execute? What I was going through and reading some of these things, it's just like lots of words, right? It was like, and I said that it was just, okay, hey, we're gonna, these, it's just a shopping list essentially, right? Except no real way to execute. So how you gonna, if you don't, the real organization starts with the budget and what you're going to be doing, right? And if anything is in there right now, you should have alignment, some dates, or some time frames, or anything for you to start with. You don't get the budget and then go, okay, now let's start the planning.
Yeah.
Right.
So Marlon, on this is where you're exactly right, but they do in many cases have that. Not in all. That's so there are a couple of committees that still need some maturing. That's always been part of it. That was one of the reasons it was really nice to break out the budgets, is those committees that needed more maturing could take the time to do it. So their budgets didn't have to be forced over the finish line before they were ready and had all that.
Yeah.
So that's one of the important parts there. But the committee, there are committees that do have that. There are, like I said, that's why I keep pointing out TSC, OSC, product. Those guys all have that because the very few companies that can do that work have those plans, right? And they brought those plans forward, and they're here. So,
but when you say companies, what do you mean, like companies? Because I'm talking about like what I can read from what's being proposed, like right now on the knowledge base and things like that.
This is where this hybrid model is coming out now, and this is again literally brand new. This is what I feel the pivot is going to look like, is that we have companies who already do this work in the space. So we're a new entity in an existing space, and this new entity has been tasked with oversight. Okay, so what we're feeling our way through is, where does oversight begin? Where does allocation begin? Where does allocation end and procurement begins? Where does procurement end and oversight begin? Okay. So, I mean, and for you, Marlon, I mean, you've got this, you do this every day, so you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
So, but what's weird about the hybrid thing that Intersect is as of right now, we're allocation and then we're oversight. And so there's a process in between allocation and oversight that is muddy right now. And that is the procurement process. So I think it's going to, I don't know for sure. I think in the short term, I think it's going to look like the companies that were already procured in the past to do this work, and possibly some new entrants that can come along with it, because they have this thing called CDEC that they've developed. They're going to handle probably a good chunk of the procurement process. So we'll get out of the middle here, right? And they will have to handle that part. So we'll handle allocation. So we're gonna help get the overview of the budgets. They'll have to have the project plans themselves, but that will be theirs. They're not going to share the project plans, and probably rightly so. I can say this from my own very, very quick detour here, that there have been times where I was asked to produce a product plan as a proposal, and I did, and then they took my product plan and gave it to somebody else to do the work. And that's a very painful thing to go through, because you did all the work and you gave all the insight, and then somebody else did your work. And that happens, and that's a terrible thing to do and to have. So that's something that we definitely don't want to have in this space.
So what are the communities? So what are the communities proposing right now then, these numbers and what they hope to accomplish? What are those?
They've done it with FTEs to accomplish the roadmaps. Duncan, I'm sure you can definitely add some color to this.
Absolutely. Look, there's a lot of points being thrown around here. I just want to say that actually one of the biggest challenges that we've had as we've gone through trying to build out the technical steering committee, roadmap of what may be put forward, is that when you are collecting a lot of different proposals from across the community, it's completely open. Anyone can put forward something for core infrastructure of a development, that you get those in very different formats. So how do you actually, we've had to put a structure in place that says, related to software readiness levels, so that says, right, what have you actually built so far? What is actually in place? Do you have a white paper? It doesn't need one. Does it? Is there a SIP in place? Does it need one? And of this proposal, what are you actually proposing that you're going to do? Where are you going to take this to? Because often these are multi-year projects to deliver. So and we can't just write you a check for 3 years worth of development and then see you. We have to be gating it properly. So actually putting these projects into a standard format has been one of the big has been one of the big pieces of work that the Technical Steering Committee, Product, and the OSC have worked together as these proposals have come in. It's certainly, and I should say that we've had to do that while we've been putting together the budget. So hopefully we will be able to share more information on the things that are potentially going forward within core.
So thank you again. More context, right? So you see how this is. I keep personally trying to remind folks this is a totally new thing that we're doing. We are developing in public a new model. That really there's no precedent for. So it's going to be very interesting. We're going to make mistakes along the way. Duncan, what you got, man?
Sorry about that. There we go. It was related to getting proposals in that, we opened up this process that we wanted everybody to be able to bring forward their ideas. But actually how you manage those, we've been learning as we've gone in things that we've encountered along the way. One of the big things that is having to go back to project proposers, say, have you actually really defined the benefit here? It's not clear. Is this demonstrable? Have you actually gone out to the community yourself to show that there's demand before we potentially put you forward for millions of ADA's worth of funding for this? So there's a big element there on how do we do, or how does Intersect help these third parties do community outreach? We put things on our knowledge base. We can have open sessions like this, but actually there's an awful lot more to it of how can you actually show that of all the possible ways of addressing an issue that's been identified, that your way is the way that the community wants to invest in. And that whole mechanism is one that we are learning as we go, quite frankly, on the best way of doing it. And we're very interested in hearing feedback on what is the best way to put what can be quite complex and involved proposals in a coherent way that lets people feel empowered to understand what their options are.
Well,
So,
I'm just gonna
say
one last thing. I don't mean to cut you off or anything. It's just like when I look at it, and I'm like, okay, where is this all going to? I don't see the measurable result. It just seems like we're asking, but how can we measure what you're going to deliver? It just says, oh, we will do something. And
absolutely.
And then
I'm sorry to cut you off. I want to respond to that point because it's a very good one. There are instances where we felt the same, actually. There have been some proposals that have been put forward that we feel that, or those that have been reviewing, the comments have been very similar to yourself, that this feels like a good thing to be doing. It does feel like we want to address the issues that you're, I'm trying very hard not to point to any particular projects to bias it, but to say that this feels like the right thing to be doing. But in this proposal, it's not clear where you are getting to and what you're going to deliver within this. You're calling for funding for X number of heads to develop this, but actually within the year, within 12 months, where are you going to get to? How will we actually measure success? And that has been one of the big things that we've had to go back a lot with to help firm up these proposals. So I guess I'm only interrupting to say that we completely agree with you, but we are sort of held by what is present. We can only present back what has been shared with us.
Absolutely. And here's again, thank you both, Marlon and Duncan, because that was a great piece of this puzzle that needs, fleshing out, right? And so, in part of that, and this is actually where a lot of what the stresses that the folks at Intersect have felt is that all takes time and money. Okay, so we are in effect a public good, right? We have an open door that people can come in, provide a proposal, and need assistance in order to move forward. So that takes time, it takes money, it takes expertise. It's a particular blend of expertise that, as Duncan just pointed out, we're still improving on. We're still learning how best to do it. And Chris here, that's just raised his hand, is part of the a couple of places in this process that we have to figure out how to fund it and how to commercialize it. And Chris is on budget and the commercialization working group, so I'm going to shut up and let him talk for a minute.
Hi all. It's really nice to listen all of you and point out problems. And outside budget and commercialization, I'm also representing one of the bigger builders, non-IOG builders. And I tapped into every budget and every committee and went even with more prejudice than most community members did, because I want this budget to make sense. And as we say inside the closed chambers, this is a foundational budget where we are learning, so that the next one that we have to build in a few months is going to be much better, bigger, and essentially a lot of line items are kickoffs. We are trying, some of the initiatives are going to be hit or miss. Maybe they're too big, maybe that was small. For instance, we saw that community hubs don't need so much money year over year, so it was all that amount was already reduced. And when you look at the whole budget, like the whole big number, and when you dissect it, like who is getting what, which bucket, and the developing, so software engineering bucket is large, but it's not half, it's less than half. And that part is expensive. And when the whole group of developers, so everybody who's building, most of us who are building on Cardano are talking about it, we need to collaborate together. There isn't a single vendor who can build all by himself. Small things take a long time. I participated in Genesis. And when I first heard about Genesis, it was a few years ago. And we knew that it was being prolonged for many issues. It took us few months of hard work to realize what needs to be done. And even that, after that, when we started implementing it, it took more than 12 months. Our assessment was 11 months. It took us 12 and a half. This is with vacations and everything. And we are oriented on delivery. We're not oriented out. This wasn't time and material, so it's gonna take how much. We're just gonna keep billing. We had a scope and time frame, but we had a fixed amount. And it was in our interest to deliver as fast as we could. Even with that, it takes a lot of effort, a lot of resources. And that was just one small increment. And when you scale it up, you need people who are coordinating, you need a lot of overheads. And on every step, we are trying to minimize the cost, implement new tooling. I'm listening to you on one screen. I have two screens about how to be more effective in building in Cardano. And we're working on this actively for future, for this, not for this year, but the next, for 2026. And the amounts are huge because there are lots of people, and building a blockchain is not cheap. And this year's budget, however it looks big, for some things it's not. no, this was me talking about software development, and that's the TSC and product did amazing job. When we came to go through their budget line items, it was more or less great because the people who are working there are professionals. Other committees, that there were different flavors. You had a mix of people who knew what we were doing and people who were completely new in the role, and essentially we're expecting that they can build something with sticks and sugar, and you could build a rocket. And then you had people who knew how to build a rocket and were thinking about, oh, let's build a double rocket, but one rocket will be built in our shed and we'll keep it for ourselves. So we also can read that, okay, guys, you're doing, and this is an overkill. So, oh, don't even think building a moon base. That's another one of mine. Like putting a budget line item, like they're building something on the moon. Like, yeah, you need to scale down. So it's a process. We are very close, and I feel, so this is my personal opinion, that Intersect staff, which I'm not part of it, has gone even a little bit too far in going and creating a process model that's harsh on this in this time, because they're building a scalability and they're building to be very resilient. There are so many processes and so many checks that it's like they're building a state level process. And then you come think about, oh, there's a constitution, this is decentralized, you have the reps who are voting on the bill, on a budget. So it makes sense that all of this is built very resiliently, very thoughtful process. What's really missing, and why I'm sitting here, and Lloyd is sitting, and Duncan is coming, and Simo and Tex, is to explain why is it so complicated and why the numbers are here, and why some things look weird and some things look out of proportion. One thing is, as a budget committee member, I can go and I feel I can ask anybody everything. So I went to committee members directly and asked, okay, we have a one-on-one meeting next week. You're going to explain the whole budget to me personally, because our allotted time didn't allow me to understand why your budget is written like that. And then it makes more sense. So you also have to understand that we don't have much time for us to understand in those sheets, not so big to explain all the thought process. And when you realize that a lot of the items have been thoughtful, there's documentation behind it. Perhaps some of them forgot or didn't think that they need to send us links how they came to the process. Why did they choose, I don't know, $50,000 for any for an line item? Why is 50,000 not 40? But in general, they all did a really good job considering the time, and essentially most of them are actually everybody's volunteering except very few people. At this point, I'm still hoping that we get this pushed in May, so we have contracts and kickoff of activities May, June, because with all of this is nice, but there are other ecosystems which are eating us. And when you talk about big numbers, when we did a risk assessment, one of the risks is somebody coming and just swooping everything, like taking builders, and there's nobody left to build. Just taking the knowledge and the effort. So we need to be faster, not to wait, because Cardano will die out. That's going to happen. And Intersect is just a conduit. They're not going to be a big bad wolf in all of this.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. It's this is a couple of points that you said there, like building it, certain things at state level. Like, I mean, ultimately, that's this is a government, so this is an institution. So yeah, a lot of people are institutionally minded who find this interesting, like that. So that you've drawn those exact people into these exact positions. it's a natural fall on to what has happened. So again, and I understand fully that in the sort of meta environment, the larger world environment right now, there's a lot of distrust in institutions at all. So people see what we're doing as something negative because we're institutionalizing things. Institutions, just like a procurement process isn't inherently evil, neither is an institution. Those things aren't inherently evil, they're tools. It's how you use the tool that determines whether or not it's evil. And our motto here is obviously can't be evil. So I think a lot of what went into developing the processes was that mindset of can't be evil. How do we make sure, right, that we can't be evil in this process, that we can't be supplanted? And the other point that I really do want to really nail home that you just brought up here at the end of what you were saying was the real danger of losing our development teams. Individual developers see a high salary, lots of benefits, go work in AI, go work in biomed, go work in, and by the way, Haskell devs are very, very useful in biomed. They are very useful in finance. There are some huge industries that Haskell developers are needed in. So it's not like Cardano is the only place for them to work. So knowing all of that, they can easily move elsewhere and take on really big salaries. But that's also true of a lot of us that are here that have softer skills and work in the softer skill areas. There's lots of very big opportunities out there. So the harder that this is to maintain and make a living here, the less likely we keep the true talent. And so we do have to strike a really good balance here. And I'm hoping we can do it. I believe we can. I believe in the Cardano community, and I believe we can strike that proper balance and start moving quickly. So we're getting down to our final thoughts. I'm conscious of time. We've only got 5 minutes remaining. So Marlon, I'll happily take a final thought from you and then anybody else, and then we'll wrap up the meeting.
No, I like it, and I forgot his name, but great thought process, and that's what I was going to recommend that was needed. Like, get people at the table, go through, and just get it knocked out, because sometimes these meetings here are productive, but other times it just degrades into Intersect bad, right? And that's not helping anyone move forward. And the other part of that is what I was thinking about as far as the future, making things less complicated. It's based on, how things are structured. And I know how Lloyd mentioned before, incubation and things like that. And I shared a document with him before, and I was like, hey, is it possible that Intersect itself could become more self-sustainable? As far as, because we do marketing, we have a governance structure, those are things we can sell out to other projects that are out there. Just because we're a nonprofit doesn't mean we can't make money. Look at Goodwill. And it allows us now to build a reserve to continually move forward, and we're not so reliant on, okay, the next budget cycle. And because right now this is scary to me, like looking at it must be scary to you guys also, right?
So yeah, thank you, Marlon. I appreciate it. And yes, and I hooked you up with text previously so that you could bring your stuff, because it actually fit very well with what they were doing in commercialization. So yeah, I always appreciate your feedback, you and everybody else is bringing to the community. So I do want to give Beatrice a moment, because we are down to our final 3 minutes. And so maybe we'll let Beatrice take us out.
Hi, I just
Okay.
had a general question, like with all of this, can we expect a bit more transparency from Intersect, considering, I mean, I think not Simon, but Chris mentioned something about like, yeah, the community perceives the Intersect as bad, but I think this would be like the perfect moment to like give some insight into things that might just show exactly that Intersect isn't bad. We're doing everything that we can to make this the best process ever, by not necessarily being radically transparent, but like, prioritizing transparency in the best possible way, both for Intersect and the community to understand.
Absolutely, Beatrice. I've already prepared stuff to to just I kind of had to do like a retro of my own kind of internal, just kind of like, how the hell did we get here? How the hell did we get to the point where where you can't do that, you're a power grabber? I'm like, whoa. Well, that is not the perception that anyone should have of anyone here, because I know that no one here is doing that. So how did we get that? How do we get to that perception? And so I've been writing, I've been reading, I'm gonna release a statement myself, but I have always promised that I will take and reflect before I react and respond. I'm always going to treat with courtesy, and I'm always going to try to have a charitable ear to hear all the feedback, even when the feedback is harsh. And so it takes me a few days to get through that. I am going to go and I'm going to meet with Charles directly. I'm going to speak to him. I'm going to see his position. I can't not do that, right? I have to take on board what it is that he said, and I have to steer the change in course that for my part of this, in a direction that's more fitting to what the community wants. I chose this role. I chose to be out front in this process. So I'm taking accountability. I made mistakes. I'm going to find a way to be more listening, more charitable, more more patient, more honest, more everything, to where we get this to where the community is going to be able to run with it and do what it needs to do, and do it in a way that it wants to do it. Right. So I'm here for it. We'll make that happen. We'll make it happen together. That's what this is going to be. This is going to be us doing things together. So on that note, it is 7 a.m. It's been a full hour. I appreciate you guys. Your attention is your most precious resource, and you've shared it with me today and with all of the Cardano community. You're making Cardano better by sharing your attention in this manner. So thank you all for your time, and we'll see you next time.